All right, so today we're going deep, really deep
Push
into
burn.
human history,
Yeah.
but not the kind
Right.
fell asleep to in high school.
Yeah.
You've given us some excerpts from Hans-Hermann Hoppe's book,
Oh.
Eine kurze Geschichte der Menschheit,
Yeah.
A Short History of Man If You Don't Speak German.
Right.
And this guy, well, he's got a very unique way of looking at things.
He does, yeah.
So for those who haven't encountered Hoppe before,
Mm-hmm.
can you give us a little,
A little background.
yeah, like who was he?
Well, he was actually a student of Jürgen Habermas,
Oh, wow, okay.
some famous Marxist, yeah.
So he started
He started as a Marxist,
on the left?
but he had a pretty radical shift.
Really?
Yeah, he became a leading libertarian thinker.
A libertarian.
Yeah,
Okay.
influenced by,
Marx.
economists like Mises and Rothbard.
Okay, so a very different,
A very different approach.
and that, I mean,
Well, that shift,
has been pretty controversial.
oh yeah, it pretty much cost him his academic career back in Germany.
Wow. Talk about sticking to your principles.
He did.
Okay, so what is it about Hoppe's take on history that's so different?
So he basically uses economic principles to explain these big historical shifts,
Like what kind of shifts?
like how private property came about,
Okay.
why we went from aristocracy to democracy, and even the Industrial Revolution.
That's a huge span of
Yeah.
time.
And he doesn't shy away from
No.
challenging the traditional explanations.
All right. I'm intrigued. So where does he begin?
Well, he starts with the basics,
With the
hunter-gatherers,
Okay, so we're talking
small nomadic groups,
yeah.
limited possessions,
Like the classic caveman image.
pretty much, yeah.
And then
And then he throws in this curveball,
okay,
overpopulation.
overpopulation. How?
Well, as humans spread out, right, they hit a limit.
Limit of
Land.
there's only so much to go around.
Exactly. And that leads to conflict.
Makes sense. Something's got to give.
Yeah, something had to change.
So
Oh.
what's Hoppe's solution?
He says private property and the family emerged as solutions to this.
Okay, so we go from
From communal living
Yeah.
to families as the basic economic unit
with
their own land and resources.
I see. So that would
It incentivizes people
right.
like
River.
to work harder, to be more innovative.
Yeah, because if you're benefiting directly,
We're more motivated.
makes sense.
And it also encourages people to think about family size.
Oh, okay. So like
Yeah, Hoppe's very critical
Huh.
of the free love idea.
because though
Well, economically speaking, unlimited kids, not sustainable.
right. Okay, so families and private property, that's the foundation.
Yeah, for a new way of life.
But how did it spread?
Well, for a long time, the dominant theory was demic diffusion.
It means
Migrating farmers, pushing out hunter-gatherers?
like taking over.
Essentially, yeah.
But
But recent evidence suggests
yes.
cultural diffusion played a bigger role.
So the hunter-gatherers
Saw how well the farmers were doing.
and said, "Hey, we want some of that."
Yeah, who wouldn't, right?
I mean, these
That's
settlements,
what they had.
advanced tech, irrigation,
Mm-hmm.
pottery, even early metalworking,
Attracting people.
huge populations. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, why chase rabbits when you can have a
Yes.
stable food supply?
right.
Okay, so that brings us to this big hurdle that Hoppe talked about.
The Malthusian trap.
Right, can you give us a quick rundown?
I don't know what that is.
Imagine humanity stuck on a treadmill,
Okay.
running hard but not getting anywhere.
That sounds
That's the Malthusian trap. Population growth
always.
outpacing resource production.
So everyone's stuck in poverty.
Yeah.
Bleak.
Hoppe even has diagrams
showing.
how population and income were basically flat centuries until around the 1800s.
Wow. So what does he say?
What causes this?
Yeah.
Well, the usual explanation is weak property rights, bad institutions.
Bring us back.
But Hoppe,
Yeah.
he says it's not just that. We needed
Oh.
something more
Smarter.
smarter humans.
Wait, he's saying
Human intelligence.
was the missing piece.
Yeah, he says it took thousands of years.
Oof.
Evolution, natural selection,
And for our brains to basically
develop the capacity for innovation
to break free.
from that Malthusian cycle.
So the Industrial Revolution
It wasn't just
moving
the obstacles. It was about having enough brain power
to outsmart
Yeah.
population growth.
and create abundance.
Wow, that's a big.
It changes how we see things.
It does, yeah.
It raises the question, though, what drove that development.
Of intelligence.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does Hoppe say about that?
He points to harsh environments.
Harsh?
It's like places with long winters,
Right.
limited resources.
You gotta be...
You have to be smart to survive.
Right.
You have to plan ahead, be creative.
So those who weren't,
They didn't make it.
natural selection.
Exactly.
Okay, so private property, smarter humans...
They get us out of the Stone Age.
into progress.
Right.
But then,
And as another twist,
what's that?
that maybe going from aristocracy to democracy
What does it say?
is a step backward.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a pretty...
Controversial to understand it, though.
You gotta...
Ask what? How do societies resolve conflict
Over...
over scarce resources?
Okay, yeah, that's a...
It's a problem every society faces.
Right. Resources are limited.
People want them.
Conflict happens.
So what's the solution?
What does Hoppe say?
Well, he asks us to imagine
To imagine
someone proposing that one person
one person.
has all the power.
Oh, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. But here's the thing.
Oh,
That's
man.
what the state is.
He's
Even a king or a democracy,
it's a form of...
tyranny.
Wow, okay.
He believes that any system where one group
Okay.
controls the law
Yeah.
and the use of force,
It's flawed.
yeah,
So it doesn't matter if it's
a king, a parliament, a president,
it's the concentration of power itself.
that's the problem.
Okay, so what's the alternative?
Hoppe's ideal
Yeah.
is what he calls
He calls it.
a natural aristocratic order.
Okay, so are we talking like,
Like feudalism?
yeah, back to the Middle Ages?
Not exactly.
Oh.
He doesn't want serfdom,
Right.
but he sees some elements in those societies, like even kings and lords.
They couldn't just...
You couldn't just do whatever they wanted. They
Yeah.
needed consent to tax.
So there were some
Checks and balances.
built in.
Right. And on their own land.
3 men,
We're essentially sovereign.
like mini kings.
In a way, yeah. It's more decentralized.
So it's less about a specific
Hierarchy,
and more about
distributing power.
no monopoly on force.
And crucially,
Yeah.
there's no constantly creating new laws.
It's about
Upholding good old law
timeless principles.
that are discovered, not invented.
Okay, I'm starting to see...
Libertarian influence.
Yeah. But if this system was relatively...
Stable?
How did we end up with absolute monarchs?
That's a great question.
Like, how did they get so much power?
Well, Hoppe says, kings were pretty clever, consolidating their power. How?
They exploited envy,
Envy of.
the common man towards the nobility
So they turn people
against each other.
divide and conquer.
Yeah, but they also needed a narrative.
A narrative, like a story.
Yeah, to justify their rule,
Propaganda.
basically.
What kind of story were they selling?
They painted a picture of pre-monarchy life
As?
as chaotic, a nightmare, everyone at each other's throats.
Yeah, forgetting any previous order.
So look how bad it was before me
You need me.
to keep things from falling apart.
Exactly. And they went even further. They created this myth,
The myth of
the social contract,
that people willingly gave up their freedom.
for the king's protection.
But who would agree to that?
Hoppe says no rational person would.
But this myth,
It was effective
it legitimized the king.
and paved the way for constitutional monarchy.
Now that's usually seen as
Progress.
limiting the king's power.
Right.
What does Hoppe say about that?
He says that while absolute monarchies
Absolutely.
stable, introducing a constitution, it formalized the king's power
Right.
to tax, to legislate.
So it's not about protecting the people
It's about protecting the king.
from being challenged.
Exactly.
So the Constitution becomes a tool.
To expand power.
Wow.
And this sets the stage
sort
in a
of
month.
crowdy. Yeah, that's where I get a little... Yeah, I mean, isn't democracy about...
The people having power?
Right, so how does Hoppe
How does he reconcile that?
with his critique?
This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay,
He argues that democracy,
well, it looks like it empowers people.
it's really just a continuation of the same
A
error
concentration of power.
in the hands of the state.
But people get to vote.
He doesn't deny that.
But he's saying
The real power,
lies with...
those who control the state,
regardless of...
who's technically in charge.
So it's like
An illusion.
of self-rule.
Exactly.
While a select few...
Make the real decisions.
So like anyone can play in the NBA.
But only a few make the rules.
Perfect analogy.
And Hoppe talks about this
Yes,
functional privilege.
where everyone's supposed to be equal.
But those in government,
Dave,
the power to decide for everyone.
I see how that creates...
Yeah, even with voting.
And it gets worse.
Out the
Democracy leads to
a decline in
morality. How
when people feel entitled.
to other people's wealth.
It erodes values.
Oh.
Hard work, self-reliance.
It creates a culture of
Dependency.
where people are less
Motivated to contribute.
and more focused on
Getting their share.
Okay, but haven't democracies also achieved
Social progress.
like civil rights?
That's a good point.
That's something Hoppe doesn't really
Fully address.
his focus is mainly on
The economic and political
consequences.
of democracy.
Right. So instead of an aristocracy based on
Primat or lineage.
we end up with
A new ruling class.
who are good at
Playing the political game.
and Hoppe says
This leads to
a new type of ruler.
the plutocrat.
Now, we hear that word a lot.
But what does he mean?
Is it just a rich person?
Not quite.
Boutique.
It's someone who uses the state.
To get richer.
They understand how to manipulate.
The
They
system
buy politicians, lobby.
shape public opinion.
They're the puppet master
Pulling the strings.
from behind the scenes.
So democracy,
Makes this problem worse.
the plutocratic control.
Okay.
And he sees this in a lot of ways.
Not just economics.
He talks about how it transforms warfare.
Okay, so
Monarchical wars,
they were about
dynastic disputes, family squabbles,
limited objective,
violence directed at armies.
like a business transaction.
Kinda, yeah.
But democracy,
Blurs the lines between
everyone feels a sense of ownership.
of the state.
Asia.
So war becomes
And
a fight for survival.
because leaders can't claim,
Foreign territory.
they have to justify war,
Ideological.
a battle for freedom, democracy.
Abstract ideals.
So the stakes are higher.
The goals are less clear
No wonder wars drag on.
and have devastating consequences.
As Hoppe says.
Plutocrats, they make it worse.
But wouldn't they want to avoid conflict
You'd think so.
with their global interests?
But actually, they're often eager
to use military force?
to protect their interests,
Yeah.
even if it means
Intervening in other countries
so they're happy to use force
to advance their agenda?
at the expense of.
Peace and stability.
Wow.
And this tendency for escalation,
It plays in
Hoppe's larger point,
about.
the state's drive for power,
He sees a trend towards
centralization.
empires.
Okay, so it's all connected.
Yeah.
But if this is all so bleak,
Mm-hmm.
is there any hope?
For a better future.
That's the big question.
It is.
What does Hoppe say?
Well, he does offer a glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
He argues that as the state gets worse,
Mm-hmm.
people will naturally resist.
Okay, like a pendulum.
It swings back.
The further it goes one way,
The harder it swings.
back the other.
So it's about
raising awareness.
showing people,
There's a better way.
and for Hoppe, that meant
Education
there's
gives
just
people the tools.
the tools.
See through the propaganda.
That a better society,
Yeah, so he believed
freer
it.
society is possible.
What did that look like?
Yeah, like no government at all.
He envisioned a world conflicts are resolved privately
Privately.
through arbitration.
Okay.
Law is discovered, not legislated.
Not good.
Custom reason,
Okay.
and individuals are free.
Free from
I
the
heard it.
state.
That's pretty radical.
It is.
But I can see how it appeals to people.
Yeah, disillusioned with the system.
Exactly.
But how do we,
How do we get there?
yeah, practically speaking.
Hoppe was a big advocate. Decentralization
Okay.
and secession from
the
state into
Small unit?
giant ship.
Yeah.
It's easier to steer.
A bunch of smaller boats. That's a good analogy.
So instead of reforming the system,
We
build new ones.
outside the state's control,
Localized.
responsive to people's needs.
Less likely to be aggressive
It's harder to wage war.
when you have to convince your neighbors.
It's almost like
Going back to our roots.
those small tribes,
Yeah.
modern tech.
And knowledge.
He wasn't against progress.
No, just against sacrificing liberty.
Okay, so is this realistic?
That's the question.
Can we really escape the state?
Hoppe admitted.
There are.
No easy answers.
He saw his work
A
as
starting point,
Yeah.
not a utopia blueprint.
there will be challenges.
Of course.
So what's the takeaway for us?
I think the biggest thing,
Critical thinking.
Hoppe wants us to
Question our assumptions.
look deeper.
Be skeptical of power.
No matter how.
How well-intentioned. Don't just accept things.
Question everything.
Imagine an alternative.
Even if you don't agree with him,
It's value.
to engage with his ideas, to have these conversations.
About the state, about freedom.
It's been a real... Hoppe's book left me with...
More questions than answers.
But that's good.
It is.
It's made me think.
About uncomfortable truths.
Rethink my assumptions.
That's what a deep dive does.
It sparks curiosity.
Challenges us.
Makes us want to learn more.
Well, I definitely have a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Maybe we can revisit Hoppe later.
And see
what progress we've made.
Towards a freer future.
Thanks for guiding us through this.
It's been my pleasure.
It's been fascinating.
Remember, the future is unwritten.
We get to decide.
What role we play. That does offer a glimmer of hope, though.
Okay, a glimmer.
He argues that as the state gets worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
As the consequences get more obvious,
yeah,
people will start to resist.
Push back?
Yeah, it's like a pendulum.
Yeah.
You swing it one way, it swings back harder the other.
So the further it goes,
exactly,
the bigger the reaction.
So for Hoppe, this meant
what?
Education.
Okay.
Giving people the tools
to
see through the
lies,
the propaganda,
to see a different way,
a freer society.
So he believed it was possible.
He did.
But what did that even look like to him?
No government at all.
Whoa, okay.
He imagined a world.
Yeah.
Conflicts are resolved privately.
Privately. Through arbitration.
No courts.
No state courts.
And the law.
It's discovered. Not made up from politicians.
But through...
Custom?
Reason.
Okay, so like natural law?
In a way, yeah.
Yes.
Everyone
free from
the state's interference.
That's pretty radical.
It is a radical vision. But it waits...
With those...
Yeah, who are set up with the system.
Who see the problems.
Exactly.
Okay, but how do we get there?
How do we get from here to there?
Practically, what can we do?
Hoppe was a strong advocate for decentralization and secession.
Breaking away
into smaller units.
So instead of one big
giant ship,
hard to steer,
you have a fleet of smaller boats.
Much more maneuverable.
So we don't just reform the system, we build new ones.
Outside the state.
More localized.
More responsive.
To people's actual needs.
Less likely to start wars.
It's harder to wage
when you have to convince
your neighbors.
Going back to our roots.
Those small, self-governing
tribes.
But with,
all the benefits of modern technology.
Right. He wasn't against progress.
No, just against sacrificing freedom.
Okay, so is this realistic?
Can we really escape the state?
Big questions.
Even Hoppe admitted not a simple solution.
There will be challenges, setbacks.
So what do we take away from all this?
The biggest takeaway, I think,
is
thinking.
Hoppe wanted us to
question everything.
Don't just accept the way things are.
Look deeper, be skeptical.
Especially of those in power.
No matter their intentions.
So even if we don't agree with everything, it's still important to
think about these things.
To have these conversations.
About the state, about freedom.
Yeah, it's been a
real deep dive.
Hoppe's book. It really
gave us a lot to think about.
More questions than answers.
That's how you know it's a good one.
It's challenged me
to rethink some things.
And look at history differently.
To be more critical.
Yeah, that's the power of a deep dive, I guess.
You don't get easy answers.
It's about sparking curiosity.
Challenging our perspectives.
Making us wanna
keep learning.
Absolutely. Well, I know I have a lot to think about now.
Me too.
Maybe we can even revisit Hoppe's work sometime.
Yeah. Down the line.
See where we're at. See if we've
made any progress
towards that freer future.
It's a journey.
Thanks for guiding us through this.
Of course. Always happy to.
It's been fascinating. And a little bit mind-blowing, to be honest.
Remember,
the
future is unwritten.
It's up to us to write it.
That's the beauty of it.
Thanks again.
My pleasure.